Hey, thanks. Hey, Oz, can we get one more song, please?
Sure thing. Are you able to play it, Dumpster? Are you able to
I can
click the
play it
link
if
and
you want to
play?
drop it into Discord. That not a problem.
It's just better on their ears.
It's playing now. Okay, good morning, everybody. With Dumpster Truffles broadcasting around the world and across the galaxy. I hope everyone is doing well. You're with Dumpster and Puppy Max and Carmen and Ozanon. If you're able to, would you like to say hello? Oz has got a bit of a sore throat at the moment, so don't expect much out of her. Go for it, guys.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, night, world. This is Puppy Mac from the Netherlands. Have a good one.
Thank you all for coming today. It's good to see everybody.
Yeah, good day, everyone. Thanks for coming along. Have a great day.
Okay, whatever this morning finds you doing, if you're in America, it's morning. It'll be about 6 o'clock on the East Coast, just after. So it's time to get yourself out of bed, out of that snuggy doona and those nice warm socks, and grab yourself some coffee and get vertical. Because you're with Dumpster, you're rocking with the best of them. And whatever it is that finds you this morning, it might be that you're a young mum, you might be a student, you might be a shift worker, you might be just getting out of bed to start your day. Whatever it is that you're doing, I'm glad you could join us to start your day with. There's quite a bit of conversation out in YouTube about today's iPod, so I'm going to have to make a written note to watch that before I go to bed. And yeah. So I'll make this announcement now, and I'll make this again towards the end of the show. Me and the rest of the team are going to have to cut back on the hours we put in. At the moment, I just cannot do 3 shows a week. So what's going to happen is we're going to do the Friday show, which will be sort of a way to get your weekend started. So the Friday morning show, that's the Friday morning show, is going ahead as usual, but we're actually canning the Monday and the Wednesday show. Comments from anyone?
At least for now.
Oh yeah. This isn't a permanent thing, that's for sure. I promise to see this thing through with you guys. This whole Q plan, this whole. I do promise to be here with all of you, and I will be here with all of you as we proceed through the events of the next months, possibly years. So, as Carmen said, it's not permanent. It's just an adjustment in the commitment that we're making at the moment. I'll definitely be here for you for Fridays. And as Carmen said, as bits and pieces pop up, we might do off the cuff shows for you. And yeah, so that's where we're at the moment, guys. I'm a little bit worn out. Carmen has been unwell. Oz is unwell at the moment. So we're going to prune it back to Fridays only. But the Friday show will be a springboard for other shows after that. So we're not abandoning you. God, no, we are not abandoning you. I love you guys. And I really do. JTO Gaming, I love you, my friend. And we got BE. But things seem to be really heating up, says BE. Exactly. This is only a temporary situation. I will be here with you guys when we call this thing done and dusted. That much is a promise. And John and Erica are sad, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm doing my very best, my level best with the technology, my opportunities, and my resources. I try to make the most out of both. And Storm in a Coffee Cup says, "We will stay with you." Cheers, Storm. I know I've got a great crowd out there. I really do. Does anyone have anything else to say?
Let's hit it.
Let's hit it. Let's hit it, baby. First slot. This is the most important slot. This is what starts us off for the rest of the show. This is what keeps us focused. This is what keeps us motivated. This is what keeps us going. This lets us know that what we are doing is the right thing. Are you ready to give your devotional, Carmen?
Yes, this morning's text comes from Psalm chapter 8. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. Through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies, to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings, that you care for them. You have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You made them rulers over the works of your hands. You put everything under their feet, all flocks and herds, and the animals of the wild, the birds in the sky, and the fish in the sea, all that swim the paths of the seas. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. This was written by a man named Tom Llewellyn, Wednesday, September 9th in 2009. He says, the psalm is a hymn to God the Creator. In the midst of praising God for his creative power, David marvels at the fact that God has created the human race. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? Through the centuries, many people have asked this question. Given the vastness and complexity of the universe, and the deep sense of smallness that this creates within us, how can a God of infinite power have any concern for us? Isn't he far too great to even think of us? David gives a different answer from many. Today, in answer to that question, many say he doesn't. God, if there is a God, is far too great to be concerned with what human beings do. After all, we're just one of the creatures on the earth, no greater, no less. But David asserted, yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings, and crowned him with glory and honor. You have given him dominion over the works of your hands, and have put all things under his feet. David remembers that of all the creatures, humans are created to be and act as God's image on the earth, his vice-regent, who is to rule over his creation under the authority of God. The first parents were given a mandate to participate with God in two of his kingly roles, to create life, be fruitful and multiply, and to rule life, fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion. That comes from Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. David's reflection on the Genesis creation account brings him to conclusions far different than those today, who think that people and amoebas are of equal value in the universe. This reminds us that we are valuable to God. No other creature is said to be made in the image of God. Only you and me. No other creature was given responsibilities so vast and abilities so grand. No other creature's redemption was counted worthy for God, the Son, to become one of them and die for their sins. Not even the angels, compared to whom we are only temporarily a little lower. There are no worthless people in this world. Today, whether you interact with a business owner, a homeless person, an immigrant, or a thief, each one is one whom God has crowned with glory and honor by making them human. You were created for great things. Don't let yourself settle for anything less than God's best. It can be easy to let what others have done to you or said about you influence how you see yourself. When you focus on those things, you can become down on yourself. However, the truth is, God doesn't see you negatively. God sees you as someone of great value. He sees who you are in Christ, and because of that, you're important to Him. However, it's up to you to walk in that truth. You've got to put aside thoughts of fear and shame and choose to see yourself the way God does. You really do matter to God. Father, when I see the mountains or look up into the night sky, I feel so small beside them. Everything you have created is so beautiful, and I thank you for waking me up again to see a new day. Thank you for everyone here, and I ask you to meet their needs. I pray for the leaders of every country, that they will do right in your sight and by your people. Protect us from those who intend to harm us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. That was beautiful, Carmen. What I got out of that was that God actually cares about each and every one of us. He actually cares. He sees each of us as beautiful and unique as we are. And you also made a point there that goes along the lines of every relationship with God is unique and personal. Would that be a good takeaway from the devotional?
Yes, it is, and it also reminds us that even though we have to contend with some of these people that we find evil, God still loves them, and He doesn't like what they do, but He still loves them.
So hate the sinner, but not the sin. No, hate the sinner, but not the sinner.
There you go.
Amen, Carmen.
Okie dokes, folks.
Okay, and there's a song there for you, Dumpster, Bluegrass for Carmen.
Sure, I'll just scroll up and hit that again. Music is playing now. Beautiful. Nice choice. Thank you very much. So there's troubles out in YouTube. Reggie can't hear me. Reggie, can you hear me audibly now, please? Give me a 5x5 if you would, my friend. And good morning, Bindi Man, and Regina, and Storm, and the fabulous Puppy Max is out there keeping order. And JTO Gaming is with us as well. How you guys doing? Okay, Regina, can you hear me, my dear? Okay, we got good comms with JTO Gaming. Good to hear that, blah blah Wales. It means you've been working hard, and hard work has its own reward. I think we might just jump into the articles now. Now, tonight it's all about the United Nations. I realized that I was using the word United Nations all the time and for a whole bunch of different purposes and different reasons as a catch-all term for something that is really actually quite complicated. I had a rather simplistic view of it, and I figured that if I was going to educate myself, I may as well have you guys with me. So I'll start with a basic description of what is the United Nations. I'll talk about what powers they have and what their agendas are. So the United Nations as a term gets thrown about a lot. What are we actually talking about? Excuse me while I go to my notes. And this is the Wikipedia. This is just the basic entry level material. So the history of the United Nations as an international organization has its origins in World War II. Since then, its aims and activities have expanded to make it the archetypal international body in the early 21st century. The earliest concrete plan for a new world organization, there's those words, New World Organization, to replace the ineffective League of Nations began under the US State Department in 1939. On June of 1941, representatives of the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Union of South Africa, and the exiled governments of Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Greece, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, and Yugoslavia, as well as a representative of General de Gaulle of France, met in London and signed the Declaration of St. James Palace. This declaration was the first of 6 conferences that led up to the founding of the United Nations and the Charter of the United Nations. So it all grew out of World War II, is what I will say. To continue, US President Franklin Roosevelt first suggested using the name United Nations to refer to the Allies of World War II. He suggested this to British Prime Minister Winston Churchill during the latter's 3-week visit to the White House in December 1941. Roosevelt suggested the name as an alternative to Associated Powers, a term the US first used in the First World War. The US was never formally a member of the Allies of World War I, but entered the war in 1917 as a self-styled associated power. Churchill accepted the idea and cited Lord Byron's use of the phrase United Nations in the poem Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, which referred to the Allies at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Excuse me a moment. So in 1942, we have the Declaration of the United Nations. The text of the Declaration of the United Nations was drafted by US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Roosevelt aide Harry Hopkins, all while meeting at the White House on 29th of December 1941. It actually incorporated Soviet suggestions, but left no role for France. The first official use of the term United Nations was on the 1st and the 2nd of January 1942, when 26 governments signed the declaration. One major change from the Atlantic Charter was the addition of a provision for religious freedom, which Stalin approved after Roosevelt insisted. By 1945, it had been signed by more than 21 states. So we have a rather chaotic beginning to the United Nations. Excuse me a moment while I go through my files. I'm jumping a whole section here in the Wikipedia. If you're interested, you can always hit this up yourself. The next section deals with the establishment. So on the 25th of April 1945, the United Nations Conference on International Organization began in San Francisco. In addition to governments, a number of non-government organizations, including Rotary International and Lions Club International, received invitations to assist in the drafting of a charter. After working for 2 months, the 50 nations represented at the conference signed the Charter of the United Nations on the 25th of June. Poland, which was unable to send a representative to the conference due to political instability, signed the Charter on the 15th of October 1945. The Charter stated that it would come into effect. The Charter stated that before it would come into effect, it must be ratified by the governments of the Republic of China, France, the USSR, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and by a majority of the other 46 signatories. This occurred on the 24th of October 1945, and this formed the official United Nations. Just a moment while I go through, and hang on, Puppy's popped something up. I'll get to this now. Okay, Puppy's got something from the Chans, it looks like. And it reads, all 193 flags at the United Nations, New York City, have been removed. New Yorker and on here. I went by the UN today on First Avenue, and that's in caps, all the flags were gone. 4 weeks ago, I was there and all the flags were flying. The UN is closed, but why remove all the countries' flags? Does this mean that the cabal founded United Nations in New York City has been ended? And we'll get into a few bits and pieces dealing with that later. But that's a pretty interesting drop there from Puppy. All the flags, all 193 flags at the United Nations have been removed.
The other picture is a confirmation of someone who drove by. Picture next to it.
Yes.
From Valerie Gilbert.
That was an awesome find. Thank you, Puppy. What's your guess on why the flags are down?
Cleaned. Or new flags, or no? I don't know.
It's strange, whatever
Could be anything.
And we know that in times like this, it could mean anything. Any further comment, Puppy?
Oh, I'm still following it, so nothing yet.
Okay, the next article I will address comes out of the New York Times. And this one is called The United Nations Explained, Its Purpose, Its Powers, and Its Problems. So, this article begins with, almost everybody has heard of the United Nations, but how many people know what it actually does or how it works, or why, as world leaders gather to kick off the 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly, the institution has struggled to live up to the promise of its founders, which is making the world a better, more peaceful place. And the United Nations Charter was signed at a conference in San Francisco in June 1945, led by 4 countries: Britain, China, the Soviet Union, and the United States. When the Charter went into effect on October the 24th that year, a global war had just ended. Much of Africa and Asia was still ruled by colonial powers. And then we've got a quote here from Margaret Huang, who was the executive director of Amnesty International, United States of America. And she says, this is a quote from her, Margaret Huang: "The UN is like your conscience. It can't make you do the right thing, but it can help you make the right decision." Just a moment, please. Oh, Oz, if you can still hear me, thank you so much. Have a good night, and I'll see you in the coming days. Okay, jumping ahead slightly. Why is that opening line notable? Because today the United Nations can, to some, seem to serve the narrow national interests of its 193 member countries, especially the most powerful ones, and not ordinary citizens. And that sentence is crucial to understanding the United Nations and its dynamics. So to continue, these parochial priorities can stand in the way of fulfilling the first 2 pledges of the Charter: to end the scourge of war and to regain faith in fundamental human rights. The next subheading is called High Ideals on Human Rights. In 1948, the United Nations proclaimed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and there's a link to that if you want to explore that further. These universal human rights include the right not to be enslaved, the right to free expression, and the right to seek from other countries asylum from persecution. I'll make a point of highlighting the right to free expression there. Anyway, I will continue. However, many of the rights expressed, to education, to equal pay for equal work, to nationality, remain unrealised. And the next section is called the General Assembly: Prominent Stage, Limited Powers. Each fall, the opening session of the United Nations General Assembly becomes the stage where presidents and prime ministers give speeches that can be soaring or cliched, or they can deliver long, incoherent tirades, such as the one given by Muammar el-Gaddafi. The annual global meeting in fall, the event offers plenty of star power, but critics contend that it is little more than a glorified gab fest. For the rest of the session, the General Assembly is the arena where largely symbolic diplomatic jousts are won and lost. Hundreds of resolutions are introduced annually, while some of them earn a great deal of attention. Like one in 1975 that equated Zionism with racism. So while some of them earn a great deal of attention, they are not all legally binding. The Assembly is responsible for making some budgetary decisions too. In principle, nations large and small, rich and poor, have equal vote in the Assembly, with each country getting one vote, but the genuine power resides elsewhere. Just a moment, please. So, the 15-member Security Council of the United Nations is by far the most powerful arm of the United Nations. It can impose sanctions, as it did against Iran over its nuclear program, and authorize military intervention, as it did against Libya in 2011. Critics say it is also the most anachronistic part of the organization. Its 5 permanent members are the victors of World War II. These are the United States, Britain, China, France, and Russia. The other 10 members are elected for 2-year terms, with seats set aside for different regions of the world. Efforts to expand the permanent membership of the Council to include powers that have emerged since 1945, such as India, Japan, and Germany, have been stymied. For every country that vies for a seat, rivals seek to block it. Any member of the Permanent Five, or the P5 for short, can veto any measure, and each has regularly used this power to protect either itself or allies. Since 1960, the United States has cast a veto on Council resolutions 16 times, many concerning Israeli-Palestinian relations. Russia has done so 13 times, including 4 times over Syria. This charter does allow the General Assembly to act if, because of a veto, international peace and security are threatened, but in reality, it is rarely done. This Security Council's job, is to maintain international peace. Its ability to do so has been severely constrained in recent years, in large part because of bitter divisions between Russia and the West. And we're getting towards the end of this article now. The Council has been feckless in the face of major conflicts, particularly those in which permanent members have a stake. Most recently, its starkest failure has been the handling of the conflict in Syria, with Russia backing the government of President Bashar al-Assad, and the United States, Britain, and France supporting some opposition groups. The Council has not only failed to halt the fighting, but has also been unable to ensure the delivery of food aid and the safety of medical workers. And that's all I'm going to pull out of that article. Okay, this is a rather long article that I'm dealing with at the moment, and I'll just pull bits and pieces out of this one if I can remember what it says. This comes out of the New American. It's from January of 2016, and the byline is our old friend Alex Newman, who I recognize from other articles. And if I recognize Alex Newman, it means he's probably a decent writer. Anyway, I need a moment to get a handle on the document, please. Okay, I will begin this article now. The United Nations and its mostly autocratic member regimes have big plans for your life, your children, your country, and your world. And those plans are not limited to the coercive climate agreement recently concluded in Paris. While the establishment media in the United States was hyping ISIS, football, and of course global warming, virtually every national government or dictatorship on the planet met at the 70th Annual General Assembly at UN headquarters in New York to adopt a draconian 15-year master plan for the planet. I'll read that again. While the establishment media, the MSM, in the United States was hyping ISIS, football, and of course global warming, virtually every national government or dictatorship on the planet met at the 70th Annual Assembly, the 70th Annual General Assembly at UN headquarters in New York to adopt a draconian 15-year master plan for the planet. To globalists such as former NATO chief Javier Solana, a socialist, are celebrating the plan, which the summit unanimously approved as the next great leap forward, which is the same as the old campaign slogan of the Chinese Communist Party. So this master plan is comprised of 17 post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 specific targets to be foisted on all of humanity, literally all of it. As the plan itself states explicitly, as we embark on this collective journey, we pledge that no one will be left behind, which reads the UN Manifesto entitled Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. But if you love liberty, self-government, free markets, or the US Constitution, you will almost certainly be wishing that the UN would leave you behind. Jumping ahead now. This agenda is a plan of action for people, the planet, and for prosperity, reads the preamble. All countries and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnership will implement this plan. Ironically, the preamble even claims the UN goals will free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and heal the planet. Or, as the planet is also referred to in the document, Mother Earth. This not so subtly purports to usurp the role of God. The UN even claimed that the future of humanity and of our planet lies in our hands. Jumping ahead now, the next section is called the Agenda. Perhaps the single most striking feature of Agenda 2030 is the practically undisguised roadmap to global socialism and corporatism/fascism. As countless analysts have pointed out, to begin with, consider the Agenda's Goal 10, which calls on the UN, national governments, and every person on Earth to reduce inequality within and among countries. To do that, the agreement continues, it will only be possible if wealth is shared and income inequality is addressed. As the UN document also makes clear, national socialism to combat inequality domestically is not enough. International socialism is needed to battle inequality even among countries. By 2030, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources. The document demands, in simpler terms, Western taxpayers should prepare to be fleeced so that their wealth can be redistributed internationally as their own economies are cut down to size by big government. Of course, as has been the case for generations, most of the wealth extracted from the productive sector will be redistributed to the UN and the third world regimes. Not the victims of those regimes, impoverished largely through domestic socialist and totalitarian policies imposed by the same corrupt regimes, to be propped up with more Western and under Agenda 2030. Jumping ahead by one paragraph here. In plain English, the Agenda 2030 document is claiming that today's consumption and production patterns are unsustainable, so we'll need to get by with less, and how much less. It would be hard to find a more clear and concise assessment than that offered by the late Maurice Strong, the recently deceased Canadian billionaire and longtime UN environmental guru who led the 1992 Earth Summit. In a pre-Earth Summit document, Morris Strong says, it is clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience foods, ownership of motor vehicles, numerous electrical appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, expensive suburban housing, these are not sustainable. So, in truth, such lifestyles and consumption patterns are sustainable so long as the freedom that makes prosperity possible is not destroyed in the name of achieving sustainability. The UN and the environmental lobby claim that we must get by with less because there are now too many people on the planet consuming too many resources. But this rationale for accepting UN imposed scarcity is patently false. I won't actually get into the details here, but we're talking about. Anyway, I'll move on. Okay, now this is the final section of the document, and it talks about China. The brutal tyrants ruling communist China, meanwhile, have also been enthusiastic cheerleaders for the UN goals that the regime boasted it played a crucial role in developing the Chinese autocracy, infamous for forced abortions, censorship, religious and political persecution, and the one child policy. Terrible pollution, kangaroo courts, and of course, murdering more human beings than any other entity in all of human history. Used its vast global propaganda machine to celebrate Agenda 2030. China has made important contributions to the global efforts in reaching a fair, inclusive, and sustainable post-2015 development agenda. The regime's deputy permanent representative to the UN, who was at the time Wang Min, was quoted as saying in a report by the Communist Chinese News and Espionage Service, Xinhua, China is also very active in putting forward Chinese proposals. The agreement includes important proposals by China and many other developing countries in numerous aspects. Among other commitments, China promised to spend $2 billion in foreign countries to meet the UN goals in education and health, with its funding increasing to $12 billion by 2030, while only contributing a small piece of the pie. The fact that Beijing is so excited about the agenda is quite revealing. Echoing Chairman Mao's rhetoric, EU and NATO globalist Javier Solana said, with a sustained commitment from all countries, developed and developing alike, the world can ensure that it celebrates another great leap forward in 2030. The last great leap forward, presided over by Chairman Mao Zedong between 1958 and 1963, resulted in the murder of an estimated 45 million Chinese who were worked, starved, or beaten to death. The Obama administration, which apparently does not plan to represent the UN scheme to the US Senate for ratification as required by the US Constitution, also offered a forceful defense of the UN agenda. Speaking to the UN General Assembly on September 27, 2015, after purporting to commit the United States to the global plot. Obama claimed the UN blueprint is one of the smartest investments we can make in our own future. So even the world's leading religious figure, Pope Francis, addressed UN member governments with a plea to support the UN goals. The adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is an important sign of hope, he declared, before demanding a UN climate regime as well. Beyond governments and religious figures, much of the private sector also enthusiastically backed the new goals. Among the mega corporations backing the scheme are the world's top 3 search entries: Google's Microsoft, Bing, and Yahoo. It was not immediately clear whether those corporations' support for the UN agenda would affect the supposed impartiality of search results, but critics of the UN plan expressed alarm nonetheless. For now, at least, and this is getting towards the end of this document, for now at least, the world and the White House are all pretending that the SDGs are binding, and that's social development goals, I do believe. SDGs are binding on Americans too. However, the US Senate was not consulted, as the Constitution requires for all treaties. Even if the Senate were to ratify it, the federal government cannot grant itself new anti-constitutional powers merely by approving a treaty. Therefore, the agreement has no force in the United States. But as UN Agenda 21 showed clearly, that does not mean that the Obama administration and possibly future presidents would not attempt to push it forward anyway. The American people, therefore, must demand through their elected representatives that the UN power grab be stopped. And that's a little bit of an article telling you how the UN functions in the real world. There are 5 states that sit on the Permanent Security Council. Any one of those states has a right of veto. And then we've got the Pope and Bill Gates mixed up in this as well. And that's where I'm going to leave it with this article. Hey Carmen, do you want to drop a song into chat so that I can play it? Or can you make small talk for 90 seconds maybe?
Hang on just a second and I can send you a song.
Gotcha. How you doing, folks? I can't see YouTube at the moment, but hello everyone. Thank you, Carmen. We are playing it cool with saxophone soft rock. And there you go, guys. That was Techno Axes playing it cool. Chosen for you by Carmen. Everyone thank Carmen. And that brings me to the fourth article in my set of articles. Okay, this comes from an outfit called Charisma News. This is from 2018, and the byline is Michael Snyder. So, to begin, have you ever heard of the global goals? If you haven't heard of them by now, rest assured that you will be hearing plenty about them in the days ahead. On September 25th, and that's of 2018, remember, the United Nations launched a set of 17 ambitious goals that it plans to achieve over the next 15 years. A new website to promote this plan has been established, and you can find it here. The formal name of this new plan is the 2030 Agenda, but those behind it decided that they needed something catchier when promoting these ideas to the general population. The United Nations has stated that these new global goals represent a new universal agenda for humanity. Virtually every nation on the planet has willingly signed on to this new agenda, and you are expected to participate whether you like it or not. Some of the biggest stars in the entire world, have been recruited to promote the global goals. If you live in New York City, you are probably aware of the Global Citizen Festival that was held in Central Park on Saturday, where some of the biggest names in the music industry promoted these new global goals. Jumping ahead slightly, all it does is describe the actual event in New York City Park. Pope Francis gave his backing to the new development agenda in an address to the United Nations General Assembly before the summit to adopt the 17-point plan opened. The Pope called it an important sign of hope at a very troubled time in the Middle East and Africa. When Danish Prime Minister Lars Rasmussen struck his gavel to approve the development roadmap, leaders and diplomats from the 193 US member states stood and applauded loudly. Then the summit immediately turned to the real business of the three-day meeting, which was implementation of the goals. This is expected to cost $3.5 trillion, all the way up to $5 trillion every year until 2030. So they had the budget, they had the timeline, they had the agenda, but that's my own comment. I'll continue with this article. Okay, so this article asks, so where will the trillions of dollars that are needed to implement these new global goals going to come from? Let me give you a hint. They are not going to come from the poor nations. When you read over these global goals, many of them sound quite good. After all, who wouldn't want to end hunger? I know that I would like to end hunger if I could. The key is to look behind the language and understand what is really being said. And what is really being said is that the elite want to take their dream of a one world system to the next level. The following list comes from Truth Stream Media, and there's a link there if you want it. And I think that it does a very good job of translating these new global goals into language we can all understand. So, goal 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. That translates into centralized bank, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and the Federal Reserve System to control all finances, and a digital one world currency in a cashless society. Goal 2 is end hunger, achieve food security and improved nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. The translations for that is pretty simple. It's genetically modified organisms, GMOs. Goal 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. The translation for that is mass vaccination. Codex Alimentarius. I think that's Latin for something rude, but I'm not sure. So mass vaccination. Then we have goal 4. Ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. That translates into UN propaganda, brainwashing through compulsory education from cradle to grave. Then we have goal 5. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. The translation to that is population control through family planning. Then we have goal 6. Ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. And the translation of that is privatize all water sources and don't forget to add fluoride. Just a moment, please. Then we have goal 7, which is ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. This translates into smart grid with smart meters on everything with peak pricing. Then we have goal 8, which is promote a sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. The translation of this is TPP, which I believe is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and free trade zones that favour mega corporation interests. Then we have goal 9, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialisation, and foster innovation. The translation to that is toll roads, push public transit, remove free travel, and environmental restrictions. Then we've got goal 10, reduce inequality within and among countries. The translation of this is even more regional government bureaucracy like a mutant octopus. Just a moment while I have a sip of water, please. Okay, which brings us to goal 11, which is make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. The translation for that is Big Brother, Big Data Surveillance States. Then we have goal 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. The translation for that is forced austerity. Which brings us to goal number 13, to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. The translation is cap and trade, carbon taxes and credits, and footprint taxes. Then we have goal 14, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Translation to that is environmental restrictions, control of all oceans, including mineral rights from ocean floors. Then we have goal 15, protect, restore and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. The translation of that is more environmental restrictions, more controlling of resources and mineral rights. Then we've got goal 16, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Translation for this is United Nations peacekeeping, and that's in quotation marks, peacekeeping missions, the International Court of Justice, force people together via fake refugee crises, and then mediate with more UN peacekeeping when tension breaks out to gain more control over a region and remove the Second Amendment in the United States of America. That's an important one, guys. Then we have the final goal, which is goal 17. Strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. The translation to that is remove national sovereignty worldwide, promote globalism under the authority and bloated Orwellian bureaucracy of the United Nations. Excuse me a moment, please. And to continue with the article, and if you doubt any of this, you can find the official documents for this new United Nations agenda right here, and there's a link. The more you dig into the details, the more you realize just how insidious these global goals really are. The elite may want a one world government, a one world economic system, and a one world religion, but they are not going to achieve these things by conquest. Rather, they want everyone to sign up for these new systems willingly. The global goals are a template for a united world. To many, the utopia, and that's utopia in quotation marks, to many, the utopia that the elite are promising sounds quite promising. But for those that know what time it is, this call for a united world is very, very chilling. And that ends Michael Snyder's article. Just a moment while I go through my articles, my notes, please. Okay, this comes from an outfit called survivalsullivan.com. And just a moment, I've got pop-ups. Okay, this article covers a lot of the ground that the previous article did, but it does go into more details in the 17 points for Agenda 2030. I can't find a byline and I can't find a date. I will get that to you as soon as I can. Excuse me while I scroll through. Okay, I'll pick it up here. We've got Article 1, which is Article 1 of the Purposes of the United Nations. This is Article 1, Purposes and Principles of the United Nations. To maintain international peace and security, and to develop friendly relations among nations, to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems, and to be a centre for harmonising the actions of nations in the attainment of these common ends. That's I skimmed over that. And the section that I'm going to pick it up at is called Suspicious UN Agendas. Much more research is needed, however. Circumstantial evidence suggests that the purpose of the United Nations is unchanged from its start. For instance, at its very beginning, it managed to seep into a worldwide advisory capacity. This worldwide advisory capacity gradually became a more global hands-on approach over the years. Jumping ahead slightly, the recent UN agenda is backed by the number one superpower on Earth, the United States of America and all of its allies. Even though this sounds like the American people are going to be the ones who benefit the most from this worldwide style of government. Excuse me, I've got pop-ups. Okay, so I will pick it up here at suspicious UN agendas. Much more research is needed, however. Circumstantial evidence suggests that the purpose of the United Nations is unchanged from its start. For instance, at its beginning, it managed to seep into a worldwide advisory capacity, which gradually became a more global hands-on approach over the years. And the UN became a dominant world force by the late 1950s, using a simple and subtle language in making its policies global, all the while wielding the quiet diplomacy of persuasion as a sword. But it's a double-edged sword used to drive forward its hidden global agenda. The recent UN agenda is backed by the number one superpower on Earth, the United States of America and its allies. Even though this sounds like the American people are going to be the ones who benefit the most from this style of government, I am afraid that they will not. Cleverly submerged beneath quiet tones of a fuzzy new world doublespeak is a hidden agenda, and I am afraid that the United Nations may be an unstoppable beast that will sweep away every measure of freedom and national sovereignty on the planet. Sorry about that. I had pop-ups to deal with and then text to follow. So the UN agenda, the UN doctrine called Agenda 21, which was introduced in 1992, this doctrine offered the first clues to their diabolical scheme, which has now morphed into the latest stage, referred to as Agenda 2030. This second stage plan, Agenda 2030, roughly spells out some of their designs for this new world power that they wield. Allow me to get this point out. No single document, organisation, or mandate gives a journalist the clues necessary to show the exact direction of this new world power or what this organisation has planned for us, for our futures. Piecing together the information and examining the actual historical outcomes of their actions is the only way to reveal the design behind this big major undertaking by the elite. The next subheading is called Understanding the Big Picture. So juxtaposed to the barrage of corporately controlled media drivel spewed on us every day, we cannot see the forest for the trees, but the information gleaned points to a bleak picture of a world dominated by government. I realize this verbiage sounds more like a plot from some Saturday morning cartoon, but evidence shows that this is far more than just a cartoon joke. Okay, jumping ahead slightly. The UN has progressively hidden its ill intent with each passing year. At the same time, it thrusts its agenda forward using quiet dictation as its main objective. It coerces the rest of the world into accepting what they can and cannot do without its dictatorial permission. Jumping ahead slightly. The UN has elbowed its way into every aspect of life on this planet. Global control may appear to be harmless to an outsider, but when critically considered and when we look at the accumulated capacity of this superpower of superpowers, there is only one conclusion. It is indeed the fabled New World government that we have heard so much about, the proverbial sleeping giant. So I'm just going to grab this section out of this section. Current evidence, perhaps circumstantial, does indicate that the United Nations is the new world government created by the elite. Someday it will rise from the facade of equality to all men, portrayed currently by the United Nations Circle of Chairs. Suddenly we will realize it has morphed into the new world order with a throne instead of a podium at its head. For example, the United Nations has taken on the duties of dictating to the world governments exactly how to govern their very own citizens. Issues under the influence include small arms treaties, climate change regulation, world trade agreements, the worldwide control of sovereign property rights and water rights and ways, and even the use of their own country's airspace. So the next section I will address is called The UN's Influence Over the Planet is Massive. The UN's influence over the entire planet today is massive. The members of the UN are purposely contradicting patterns of successful self-government in these nations, which is outside of their mandate. They influence the vote of their members on a variety of New World policies. So, the author of this article continues with, I contest that on the face of it, with the wording of these UN agendas seems benign. In fact, even peaceful and collaborative. However, the actions attributed to these world political ideas negatively influence the member governments. It suggests intent on their part, either by financial neglect, in the case of the lack of economic aid during disasters, or a blatant, in-your-face dictation of policy straight from the UN itself. Excuse me while I jump ahead, please. Okay, the next section deals with the 17 points in the Agenda 2030 plan. I just went over those, so I'm going to jump them all. Okay, jumping ahead significantly. The United Nations may have many agencies handling every aspect of the global social hierarchy, including war, poverty, hunger, agriculture, finance, economics, environmental, oceanography, atmospheric, property rights, international laws, universal laws, etc. But we can still stop them. And this is the conclusion to this article. This is the New World Order, and it is poised to move. It also looks to me that they have been planning to implement their next stage soon. It is fair to say that they have been planning this for a long time, and it might be too late for us, but who can truly say? And that's all I want to pull out of this article, actually. There's a little bit more that goes into bits and pieces. Actually, no, I'm going to pull out a couple bits and pieces more from this article. Okay, so the United Nations has specialized agencies, United Nations specialized agencies. And the UN specialized agencies are autonomous organizations working with the United Nations. All were brought into the relationship with the UN through negotiated agreements. Some existed before the First World War. Some were associated with the League of Nations. Others were created almost simultaneously with the UN. Others were created by the UN to meet emerging needs. So we have the International Monetary Fund, and the IMF currently has over $20 billion in outstanding loans 74 different nations. We also have the World Health Organization, which seems to pop up with disturbing regularity in these articles. Then we've got UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Then we have the International Labour Organization, which promotes international labour rights by formulating international standards on the freedom to associate. Then we've got the FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. We also have the International Marine Organization, the IMO, the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, the WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and the ICAO, the International Civilian Aviation Organization. And that's all I'm going to pull out of this one. And that brings me to my final that brings me to my final article. Excuse me, I have to scroll back and check out this cartoon. Are you coming to bed? Sorry, honey, I can't. This is important. What? Q just posted. Okay, this comes from an outfit called blastingnews.com. And it's from November of 2017. And the byline is Joshua Mescott and Babar Hayat. And the headline reads, Agenda 21, the cruelest United Nations policy or a necessary evil. So, the author of this article asks us a question to begin. Are you prepared to let someone in authority select who will live and who will die? Whatever your answers might be to that exceptionally moralistic statement, the year 2030 is going to subject the world to a law that has been in hibernation since 1987. According to global research, in the name of sustainable development, the United Nations Commission on Environment and Development has long ratified Our Common Future. This document, Our Common Future, this document was published under the chairmanship of Norway's Prime Minister, Gro Harlem Brundtland. The jargon goes on to record varied, pleasant-sounding phrases which boil down to one foundation of truth. 95% of the world's population will be subject to a purge come 2030. Okay? Using overpopulation as a legitimate excuse. The UN law aims to apply sustainability measures to ensure the continued well-being of the human race. So who signed off on this? The United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs is responsible for the idea to cull more than 75% of the world's population to promote sustainability policies. This is far from being a secret conspiracy or even a shadow government tactic. In fact, the UN website boldly states, comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally, and major groups in every area in which humans have impacted the environment. As recently as October, Tom DeWeese, in parentheses it says conspiracy theorist. So as recently as October, Tom DeWeese gave lectures on Agenda 21 at the Romance Theatre in Rexburg and Idaho Falls. He's been touring, aiming to spread awareness of this impending threat to our society from our own trusted higher officials. Jumping ahead now. Okay, I'll pick it up at the end of this section. Here's some food for thought. In America alone, the world's largest pesticide manufacturer, Monsanto, has been performing pseudo-legal maneuvers to make and modify food production on a national scale. And the next section is, I have my rights. That's what it's called. Apparently not. The author of this document says, if this UN policy is anything to judge by, according to the Blaze, you will be stripped of all personal rights and freedoms once this law comes fully into effect in 2030. The fact that it is such an open secret makes it truly terrifying. Chances are your government is involved and has backup measures to keep the peace and you in line. Protest groups, beware. If you so much as skip over the lawn holding Agenda 21 placards. Conspiracy theories aside, what is being done about this ominous agenda? Is this proof that we are headed toward a future where a one world government will be in effect, calling a controlled global genocide a form of population control, as the policy tactfully states, does not make it more appealing? So, in glaring accord with George Orwell's 1984 novel, Agenda 21 does not seem like it's going to go quietly, even under public protest. Even requests for more information have led people to the same official clauses and statements published in the 1987 Brundtland Report. Jumping ahead slightly. The enforcement of the policy, that is Agenda 2030 and depopulation, will revolve around partnerships among the public, private and community sectors, technical cooperation and participation in the decision-making process by special interest and community groups, women, the disabled, the indigenous and the elderly. Okay, jumping ahead slightly. The policy's wording is so flawlessly harmless that it does not constitute certified proof of ill intent. Words like sustainability, technical cooperation, activities, priorities, social and cultural capabilities, adequate shelter, capacity building, and others are keywords highlighting the particulars of the steps that governments have been tasked with to take to enforce this policy. Think about it. How can you achieve sustainability when the very real fact of overpopulation stands in its way? Theoretically, the sole answer to the United Nations sustainability and population control initiatives will be to kill off as many people as required until their agenda criteria have been met. So, will Agenda 21 stand the test of time? Will we discover new ways to curb existing population rates without resorting to global genocide? Will demand supersede supply? We have about 12 years left on the clock to find out. That's if the world does not end on November the 19th, as biblically postulated, blah, 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 and surrendered to the capricious whims of a quake apocalypse. Excuse me while I check the rest of this article out. Yeah, that's all I want to pull out of that one. Just a moment while I go through my files. And there you go, folks. You should be up to speed with the United Nations. They use marshmallow language that sounds wonderful. And that marshmallow language hides an agenda that is absolutely diabolical. It involves the death of 7 billion people or thereabouts. Thank you guys. Thanks for sitting through that. I did the United Nations this evening because I wasn't really up to speed with how they work and what they're composed of and how they got together and what they're actually capable of doing. Thank you. What do you reckon? Music? Yeah, woohoo! Music!
And good morning, Scope.
Oh, we got Scope with us. How you doing, brother?
Good morning, everyone. How's everybody feeling tonight?
Oh, yeah,
And
I'm
morning.
doing it. I'm getting there.
Nice. Well, we had quite a tsunami last night, didn't we?
19 posts. I was actually going to go through them pretty quick. Wow, some of them were
Oh my
huge too.
gosh. Oh yeah. Quite thrilling watching all those come in. Unbelievable.
I haven't actually had a look at the new Q posts yet, so maybe we can do that at the other end of the show.
Oh, that's a great idea. Lots of good little nuggets in there.
And BE's kind of depressed at the moment, mate. Mate, pick yourself up off the floor, do something practical and useful. And yeah, Gigi says, why BE? What's wrong, BE? Anyway, are you good to go, Puppy Max? Or do you need... Oh, we're playing a song and then you're going to go. Is that cool, Pups?
Totally cool.
To push to talk.
I can't. I still don't have push to talk.
Okay, I'll play some music and then you can, you can bring us the bits and pieces that you've rounded up.
Let's hit the music.
The music is playing now. I'll let you know when it's done. You got about 4 minutes, bro. Hey, that was beautiful. Have we played that one before? It seems kind of familiar.
Yeah, we have, but it's been a while.
Beautiful music. Thank you, Carmen.
You're welcome.
Are you ready to rock and roll there, puppy?
Oh, yes.
Go for it, baby.
All right. Well, like always, I'm starting with reading from the book A Day at a Time. And today is Happy Law Day, people, May 1st. And the reflection for today is those of us who have lost our faith or who have always had to struggle along without it, it's often helpful to just accept, blindly and with no reservations. It's not necessary for us to believe at first. We need to be convinced. If we can only accept, we find ourselves becoming gradually aware of a force for good that's always there to help us. Today I asked myself, have I taken the way of faith? Today I pray, may I abandon my need to know the ways and wherefores of my trust in God. May I not intellectualize about faith, since by its nature precludes analysis. May I know that head tripping was a symptom of my disease, a strung together, cleverly, I thought, alibi upon exercise upon rationale. May I learn acceptance, and faith will follow. Today I will remember, faith follows acceptance. All right, and now the articles. I have six of them for you lined up. The first one
Before you start, where
is
find them? Puppy's Notables, right?
Yeah, they're Puppy's Notables, and let me check. Let me go to Puppy's Notables. The first one I'm gonna read is posted last. Then you have to go up to NIH investigation. But the first one I'm going to read is the executive order. That's the last one I posted.
Gotcha.
All right. Hey guys, the best president ever signed an executive order yesterday, and it says, executive order on ordering the selected reserve and the armed forces to active duty. They're being activated, but for what? Happen, I think. Alright. By the authority invested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including Section 12304 of Title 10 United States Code, and having determined that it is necessary to augment the regular armed forces of the United States for a named operational mission, specifically the Enhanced Department of Defense counter-narcotic operation in the Western Hemisphere, I hereby order as follows. Section 1. Activation Authority. The Secretary of Defense is directed to order to active duty for not more than 365 consecutive days and units, and any individual members not assigned to a unit organized to serve as a unit of the selected reserve under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of Defense, not to exceed 200 selected reservists at any one time as he considers necessary. Section 2. General provision. A. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect 1. The authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or head thereof, or 2. The function of the Director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. B. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. C. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law, or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. Donald J. Trump, the White House, April 30th, 2020. So, they're gonna do something there in the it looks good. All right. Next article, and that's the NIH investigation in Wuhan. It's from the New York Post, and it's dated April 28th. I was going to read that on Wednesday, but we had something much better then.
What am I looking for again? Do you need this displayed on the screen, friend?
Well, if you can, you can display it on the channel on the screen. You go up from what I just read and go up to NIH investigation.
Gotcha. It's just an article. I'll let you read.
All right. Okay, it's from the New York Post, dated April 28th, and I was, like I said, I was going to read that Wednesday, but something much better came along. NIH investigating Wuhan lab at center of coronavirus pandemic. And I cannot read who wrote it. A Getty Images, Hector Ritamal. The National Institutes of Health revealed it is investigating the Chinese lab where the coronavirus outbreak is speculated to have emerged in a letter to a research facility that supplied US tax dollars to the lab, according to a report. Dr. Michael Lauer, the Deputy Director for Extramural Research at the NIH, wrote a letter dated April 19 to Kevin Olival of EcoHealth Alliance and Naomi Schrag of Columbia University, informing them of the probe, Breitbart reported on Monday. The letter noted that EcoHealth Alliance received an NIH grant titled Understanding the Risk of Bad Coronavirus Emergency. It is our understanding that one of the subrecipients of the grant funds is the Wuhan Institute of Virology, WIV. It is our understanding that the WIV studies the interaction between coronaviruses and bats. The scientific community believes that the coronavirus causing COVID-19 jumped from bats to humans, likely in Wuhan, where the COVID-19 pandemic began, said Lauer's letter, which was obtained by Breitbart. There are now allegations that the current crisis was precipitated by the release from WIV of the coronavirus responsible for COVID-19. Given these concerns, we are pursuing suspension of WIV from participation in federal programs, it continued. The NIH said that as it reviews these allegations during the period of suspension, EcoHealth Alliance has been instructed to stop providing funds to the Wuhan lab. It is in the public interest that NIH ensures that a subrecipient has taken all appropriate precautions to prevent the release of pathogens that it is studying, Lauer wrote. This suspension of the subrecipient does not affect the remainder of your grant, assuming that no grant funds are provided to WIV following receipt of this email during the period of suspension. An NIH spokesman told Breitbart that it does not discuss details of the decision-making process regarding specific grant awards. The NIH spokesman confirmed that the $3.7 million grant was spread over multiple installments over 6 years at sites including China, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Myanmar. President Trump was asked at the White House was at let me restart. President Trump was asked at the White House coronavirus briefing Monday about holding China accountable for the outbreak that has infected more than 3 million people around the world. Very serious investigations, as you probably know, and we are not happy with China. We are not happy with that whole situation because we believe it could have been stopped at the source. It could have been stopped quickly and it wouldn't have spread all over the world. The president said during the Rose Garden briefing, and we think that should have happened. So we'll let you know at the appropriate time, but we are doing serious investigations. Way to go, President Trump. And I recently saw an article about it. I can't find it. I was going to read that too. About a Japanese scientist who dropped a bombshell on that, and I still can't find it. So maybe it's not true. You have to be very careful with that. Now, I want to end after this article. I'd like some music. The last four articles are good news articles.
Woohoo!
Kinda, sorta. Okay, Publix. This is from all four are from the goodnewsnetwork.org. And the first one is Publix supermarkets are buying food for struggling farmers so they can use it to feed families in need. And it's not all that long. This week, U.S. supermarket chain Publix announced a new initiative to purchase fresh produce and milk to assist farmers impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. Publix will be donating these products directly to Feeding America member Bank Foods in its operating area. The initiative, which is expected to result in more than 150,000 pounds of produce and 43,500 gallons of milk donated to Feeding America food banks during the first 7 days, is expected to run for several weeks. The program will support Florida produce farmers, southeastern dairy farmers, and a growing number of families looking to Feeding America for fresh fruits, vegetables, and milk during the coronavirus pandemic. As a food retailer, we have a unique opportunity to bridge the gap between the needs of families and farmers impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, said Publix CEO Todd Jones. In this time of uncertainty, we are grateful to be able to help Florida's produce farmers, southeastern dairies, and families in our communities. Numerous reports of farmers discarding produce and milk that isn't being sold, mostly as a result of school, restaurant, and hotel closures. Publix hopes to address the needs of both the farming community and its local partner food banks through this initiative. We are thrilled about Publix's initiative to buy additional milk from Southeast Milk for processing and donating to Feeding America member food banks, said Southeast Milk Incorporated President Joe Wright. It's a win-win for our farmers who are feeling the impact of the decreased demand and the families who are in need of nutrient-rich milk during this pandemic. Like so many others right now, Florida farmers are in a time of need. We are Humboldt Publix is purchasing additional fresh vegetables from us and other local farms to donate to food banks throughout the Southeast, said Pero Family Farms Food Corporation CEO Peter F. Pero IV. That's a whole lot of title. Thank you to Publix, the participating food banks, and the volunteers for making this initiative for those less fortunate while supporting local farms. That's music. That's music to my ears. So, and speaking about music, I could use some music and some water.
You got it, brother. I'll let you know when it's
Thank you.
playing. We got Cushion On's Twat by Diddy. Okie dokes, folks. That was Cushionon's 12-bar ditty. And Carmen picked that one out for us. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you. Cool music.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah.
I thought that would be a good way to wake everybody up.
Woo!
And what Chat didn't get to see was while the music was playing, Pepe's up there, and the way he's walking, it almost looked like he was dancing to the music.
Cool.
Name is Pepe. James Pepe.
Pepe. Alright. Let's get into the next article. It sounds good, but I just read a piece and it looks more like a slush fund to me, but I'll read it anyway. This also comes from goodnewsnetwork.org. It says, Americans, and it's from April 28th, Americans in stable financial positions answer the call to donate their $1,200 stimulus checks. Since the United States government began issuing stimulus checks to Americans this week, a group of volunteers from North Carolina has rallied thousands of people in stable financial positions to donate part of their stimulus checks to help people affected by COVID-19. Within the first week of the Pledge My Check website being launched, over $18,000 was pledged from 37 people across 11 states. The number is now up to $70,000 pledged from 129 people across 15 states. Individuals are encouraged to donate directly to the people, causes, or organizations they support because Pledge My Check is not accepting donations directly. So 100% of everyone's pledge reaches their intent recipient. Similar efforts have launched across the United States supporting a variety of causes. Currently, Pledge My Check reports that the largest sum of their pledges is being directed